Hello, my favorite Religion 211 students. We are back. This is the second half of our lecture for Tuesday, June 2nd. I hope I got that right. We have only 3 lectures left after this, this Thursday's lecture, and then next week, Tuesday and Thursday. So term has gone by fast. Hopefully you've had a good experience and have learned a lot. That's my hope, is that you've learned a lot and laughed a little bit. Okay, I'm going to share my screen because we got to go quickly here because I don't want to go too over my time. All right, last time we were here, we looked at, I think we finished with the story of the wedding of the king's son. Does that sound right? So we're going to move on to the next story, which is a question about tribute. So again, in this last week, you can see there's a lot of back and forth between Jesus and the Pharisees, right? And even the Sadducees are going to jump in, which they don't usually do. Okay, question about tribute comes in 22, 15 through 22. All right, so this is just after the parable we just told. And look in verse 15. It says, "Then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his talk." Right? So we're going to get him. He's got to make a mistake publicly. Does that make sense? If you're a Pharisee, you're thinking, okay, we can't take him because he's getting more popular. So we've got to get him to make a mistake so people hate him. It's a very political move. So they sent unto him their disciples with the Herodians. Now the Herodians obviously work for who? Herod, who obviously works for who? Rome. So it's basically with the Romans. They took Romans with them. And they said, "Master, we know that thou art true, and thou teachest the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men." So they're trying to get him, like, it's amazing how you don't care what anybody thinks. That's awesome. I mean, if they couldn't be more blatant here, right? In verse 17, "Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute to Caesar or not?" Tribute is tax. So this is I think the plan behind this is get the Savior to speak of insurrection, right? Yes, no, taxes are wrong. They're terrible. Don't pay Rome. The Romans are standing there. Great, right? We get the Roman police. They come over, the Roman guards, they take him, problem solved, right? So all he's got to do is say that taxes, that Jews shouldn't pay tax to Rome. But instead, it said Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, "Why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites?" Right? They're like, uh-oh. He said, "Show me the tribute money. Show me a piece of Roman money." And they brought him a penny. And he said, "Whose image is this? And whose superscription?" And they said, "It's Caesar's." Right? There's a picture of Caesar on the coin. And he said, "Well, I guess if it has the image of Caesar on it, it belongs to Caesar." Now he could just stop right there, but instead he adds something. He says, "And unto God the things which are God's." Now remember, go back to verse 20. Whose image is this? And then he says, "And unto God the things which are God's." Can you think of any scripture that talks about the image of God? The image of God. Did you think of Genesis? Right? Genesis, what is that, chapter 2? God made man in his own image, male and female, created he them. So, and they would have picked up on that. The Romans, obviously not. But the idea is, yes, this belongs to Caesar, but people belong to God. You, Jesus says, belong to me. I mean, it is just a fantastic moment. It says when they heard these things, they marveled and left him, right? Because that is to think of that right on the spot. That is just that's beautiful. All right. Let's go to the next story. If you have any questions on that one, let me know. Okay, let's talk about marriage and resurrection. This is a story that comes up often when people have questions. Same chapter, verse 23. "Then came the same day to him the Sadducees." So remember, the Sadducees are a different group than the Pharisees. You know this. They are very much very Hellenistic, very Greek in the way they feel about their Judaism. They've allowed and even invited a lot of Hellenistic thoughts into the way they see the world and way they see God. And they come to him with it sounds like a hypothetical, but I'm not sure. It says saying, Master, Moses said, if a man die having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. That's called Levirate marriage, and I think we've talked about that on a lecture. If I haven't, will you let me know on the Q&A? Will someone say, hey, I don't know what Levirate marriage is? Okay. Now there were with us, so it sounds like among the Sadducees, 7 brethren, 7 guys. And the first, when he had married a wife, he died, and having no children, he left his wife unto his brother. So again, that's Levirate marriage. If I'm trying to think, if Danica marries Dallas and then Dallas dies, he's got a little brother named Tyler. Danica and Tyler are going to get married. It's the obligation of Tyler to marry Danica, and the children are legally going to be Dallas's children. They're biologically, of course, going to be Tyler's children, but legally, he's going to raise up seed unto his brother. Now he can refuse, but he's not going to be welcome in the family, right? Well, apparently this happened to this guy, and she and the men just kept dying, and she just kept on marrying all of them until the 7th guy dies, the 7th brother. This is one bride for 7 brothers, and alas, the woman died also. I would think that, I don't know, if I was, maybe Jesus said, and Jesus said unto them, did anyone investigate this woman? Because she has 7 dead husbands. Okay. Well, okay, now this is the important part in verse 28. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. Okay, stop right there. Do not read ahead and just tell me what that implies. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife shall she be of the 7? For they all had her. Okay, that implies that Jews taught in Jesus's day that people are married after they die, right? Because they're asking this question, saying, okay, what about, tell us about, to answer this, very difficult hypothetical question about marriage. Okay, so you have to be absolutely aware of what's implied by the question. The implied is that Jews believed it and that Jesus believed it, that people are married after they die, right? But why ask the question? There's no point in asking the question if nobody believes this, right? It would come out of nowhere and everyone would be like, what are you talking about? All right, now here's something. Let's go back to verse 23. You have to understand this part too. The Sadducees come to him, which say there is no resurrection. So they are coming to him with a question about resurrection, and it's something that apparently Jews like Pharisees and Jesus believe in, but not Sadducees. Sadducees do not believe you live after you die. So can you kind of see the setup here? Here's a Sadducee who does not believe you live after you die, which is crazy to me, right? That's so Hellenistic and Greek that that they almost don't look like Jews anymore, right? These people. So they do not believe in life after death. Okay, but they believe the scriptures. They read the 5 books of Moses, but they don't believe that you live after you die. Okay, so you have to understand everything up to verse 28, all that's implied and why they're asking the question. In my mind, here's what's happening. You've got Sadducees who do not believe in the resurrection, and they know that Jesus does. And so they're going to come up with a hypothetical that is so outrageous that it's going to make his belief in marriage after death crazy, right? Like how in the world would you sort that out? Okay. So, and I've had this happen to me before too. And I don't even know if it was on purpose, but people would say, so my grandpa was sealed to my grandma, but then my grandma died and my grandpa remarried, but he didn't marry that woman in the temple, but then they ended up having kids. And that, anyway, I kind of, I didn't really think this through. And then that kid, their child ended up marrying a lady who ended up becoming my stepmom. And so who am I sealed to, right? Just kind of this weaving throughout, I did not think this example through, but you guys know what I mean, right? Just a kind of wow situation where you're going, and then the last question is, so who am I sealed to and who's sealed to who? Right. And usually our answer for something like that is God will work it out. Right. God will work it out. Now, Jesus answered and said unto them, you do err, not knowing the scriptures, nor the power of God. All right, that verse 29, just look at it by itself there. That is about resurrection. It's not about marriage. Okay, remember, the marriage question is a side question. Matthew brings our attention in verse 23 to the Sadducees who don't believe in the resurrection. All right, so this story is not about marriage as much as it is about resurrection. And that's crucial to understanding this, because if you haven't served a mission yet, odds are someone is going to bring this story up to you and say, Jesus said there's no marriage in heaven, and you are going to be lost. You're going to go, oh, he did? Well, I promise the Book of Mormon's true. Great. It's good to be faithful. It's better to be faithful and competent. It would be better for you to say, oh, I know that chapter, Matthew 22. Did you know who Jesus was speaking to when he said that? Right? That's a crucial part of this story. Who is Jesus talking to? You do err, not knowing the scriptures, right? Obviously, if you believe in the scriptures, you would know that there's a resurrection, nor the power of God, right? You don't believe that God has power to resurrect. Okay, now verse 30, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as angels of God in heaven. Okay, now this verse is probably the most difficult verse for an explanation, but it's not that bad when you understand everything up to that point. For in the resurrection, who's they? They are the 7 Sadducees in the story. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are angels of God in heaven. It would be okay, what if this happened to me? What if I'm teaching my class and some anti-Mormon walks in and he says, I have a question for you. And I'm like, okay. And he said, in the celestial kingdom, how many wives am I going to have? Right? Now, why is he asking that question? Give me the whole point. The point of the question is to make me look foolish and to get my students, on edge going, oh yeah, I haven't thought about it. I forgot. That's terrible. Right? That is the purpose of the question. The purpose of the question is not to get a doctrinal answer out of me going, well, how many people you've been sealed to, sir? According to section 131 of the doctrine. No, absolutely not. It's just meant to embarrass me. So what if I responded and said something like this? What if I said, you don't need to worry about that because people like you don't go to the celestial kingdom. Right? Now, that's the response of Jesus. Verse 30, for in the resurrection, they, Sadducees, are not married nor given in marriage. They're as single as the angels. Right? It's a response to their trying to bait him on a marriage question. Okay? Then verse 31, he wants to talk about resurrection. Have you noticed? But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have you not read that which was spoken to you by God? Right? It says, verse 32, I am the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. So let me see if I can explain this. So when God appears to Moses in the 5 books of Moses, which the Sadducees believe in, when God appears, what does he say is who he is? He says, hi, Moses, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all of whom lived and died long before Moses. So if people don't live after they die, shouldn't God say, I was the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? Not I am currently, I was the God of Abraham. Does that make sense? Because Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have already lived and died. So obviously, according to the Sadducees, they no longer exist. But he's saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So apparently they have lived after they have died, because he says, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. So he used the 5 books of Moses to show that people live after they die in one statement by God to Moses. All right. I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I feel like you're not here. Well, sometimes I feel like you're not here. I know you're not here. And so I can't see your faces. Right. And so when I'm teaching some of these things, I would see if you look still confused or if you were like, oh, okay, I get it. And so this kind of leaves us up in the air. So if you don't grasp that one, let me know and we can talk it through. I can do a better job. All right. Let's skip that one. Let's go to just this last piece on hypocrisy in Matthew 23. You read this chapter. It's where Jesus basically declares war on the Pharisees and how they teach one thing but live another. And he is, oh man, he is all over them. He says, let's just look at a couple of them. Woe is warning, you guys. So he says, let's go to verse 24. Ye blind guides, which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Strain at a gnat and swallowing a camel means you are publicly worried about tiny little sins, but privately you're willing to break the law of Moses entirely. So, they would strain their teeth. They would strain their teeth like this to make sure no bugs got in, because bugs were unclean according to the law of Moses. But privately, they're willing to, kill someone. So they swallow a camel, which would also, eating a camel would be against the law of Moses. So it would be like me saying, you are publicly concerned about not swearing, where privately you break the law of chastity, right? So the Savior is saying, you hypocrites, right? He said, you are like a cup where the outside is clean, but the inside is full of extortion and excess. Have you ever done that before? You ever grabbed a cup out of the shelf and it looks like it's clean, and so you fill it with water, and then you take a drink and you look down in the middle of it, right inside it, and it's all full of gross stuff, and you're like, oh, right? That's what Jesus says. That's you. Man. He says, you are like a whited sepulcher in verse 27. You on the outside appear beautiful, but on the inside, you're full of death, right? Can you imagine looking at a coffin that's, been in the ground for many years, and you're like, that reminds me of you. Look on the outside, how it looks so, how it's so pretty. And on the inside, it's full of like human nastiness soup, right? That's you. This is some pretty heavy stuff. Like he is not holding back here. And the reason I wanted to show you this chapter and make sure you grab it is because this isn't the Jesus that we're used to, right? When we go to Temple Square and the Christus speaks, right, or the speaker plays, we don't usually hear, you hypocrites, right? You blind guides, ye fools, and ye blind, right? That's not usually what we hear. Yet, this is an important part of who Jesus is, and we need to allow Matthew 23 to inform us on Jesus's personality, right? This idea that Jesus is a great cheerleader. He loves you no matter what you do. Well, he does love you no matter what you do, but he doesn't care what you do, right? As long as you are doing what's good for you, and as long as you are happy, then Jesus is cheering you on, right? We kind of have that Jesus in our head, in our society, and that's just not true. You read chapter 23, and he is very much getting after these guys for preaching one thing and doing another. So I don't think that Jesus is someone who will just say, hey, as long as it makes you happy, you are okay. Or as long as you are, you be you, right? You do you, and I love you, right? That does not seem like the Jesus of Matthew chapter 23. He seems to have very high standards. And when you don't meet them, especially when you pretend to meet them, but really don't meet them, he is on it, right? Okay, let's finish and talk about the idea of hypocrite. I forgot to show you this. I want to tell you the word comes from the Greek for actor. So you would, with the Greeks, you would go see all the hypocrites in the play, right? The pretender, the actor, the deceiver, right? Not that when you see an actor, you're like, oh, he's such a liar. Look at him pretending to be a doctor. No, that's where it comes from, is this idea of I'm pretending to be something I'm truly not. Okay, and let's finish with the widow's mite. So this story is found in Mark and in Luke, but Mark tells it best. So Mark 12, 41 through 44. Go to Mark 12, and we'll finish here. In Mark Jesus is at the temple, and these people are coming to give their donations, right? And let's see, all the way over to verse 41. Jesus sat against the treasury and beheld how many people cast money into the treasury, and many that were rich cast in much. If you saw the video of this, they're like, cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. Imagine how tithing would be different if we had like a big barrel up in the front of sacrament meeting, right? And it was all full of coins. You could only donate coins. And, you know, it, people got to just watch as you walked up, right? Would you do the big, like, pour all of it in one moment, just, and everyone's like, wow? Or would you go over just one at a time? Cha-ching, 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 right? Well, this woman goes up and she throws in a fourth of a penny. A certain widow came and threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. That's a fourth of a penny. So it's, remember, a penny was paid to the laborers in the vineyard for a full day's work. So she's, let's say if it's full day's work and she's getting paid a fourth of that, which we said was about $120. So she throws in $30, right? And remember, she's a widow. And if she's a widow, and she doesn't have family to care for her, she's not going to have a lot of opportunities. Many women in this position during Jesus's day really had 2 choices. If your husband died and you didn't have the Levite marriage to take care of you, or a family to take care of you, your choice was either prostitution or poverty, really. Well, she throws in $30, and he says, this poor widow has cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. Now, the apostles have got to be going, I'm not, did you take math? Right? Because we saw her, she put in like 1 coin. And there's still people up there throwing money in who started before her and are finishing after her, right? Like, what do you mean? And he says, for they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. So the Savior notices she gave everything she could to God, while these people are still, yes, giving a lot, but it's not a percentage of what they have. It's very, very small. So this story is incredible. The picture on the bottom left is an interesting one because it was on the cover of a book called The Parables of Jesus, which it's a great picture, a great painting. But you guys, she's not a parable. This is a real woman. This is not a fictional story. This is a real woman who throws this money in. Now, what does this story mean to you? Right? What does it tell you about the Lord? 1, that he knows her, right? He knows her situation. And 2, it tells me so much about how the Lord views our offerings, right? It tells me that he views them not in forms of quantity, like, wow, Brother Romney just gave millions, but in quality, or in percentage to, what kind of sacrifice is that for that person? So it doesn't matter if I'm a poor college student, because the Lord doesn't look at my $6 in tithing and go, well, thanks. We'll buy, some sacrament cups. Thanks, pal. No, the Lord he knows me. He knows my situation. He knows where I am. And he says that was a significant amount of money for that person, which I think is crucial and so important for us to understand, because sometimes the tithing or the offerings we give seem so small that why give them at all? Right. And this story flips that around and says, no, you give them, the Lord will know. And this is what Talmage said about that widow. He said, the accounts kept by the recording of the angels, figured out according to the arithmetic of heaven. I like that. Entries are made in terms of quality rather than quantity, and values are determined on the basis of capability and intent. The widow's gift was her all. It was not the smallness of her offering that made it especially acceptable. It was the spirit of sacrifice and devout intent with which she gave. On the books of heavenly accountants, that widow's contribution was entered as a munificent gift, surpassing in worth the largesse of kings. Isn't that beautiful? All right. Let's be done. And we will see you next time on, I feel like I'm on a television show. We'll catch you next time on Come Be Bored with Dr. Smith. All right. I will see you guys soon at a Q&A.